Welcome back in this section on contract to close. And I want to go into more detail. As I said before, I want to go into more detail in inspections. This is something you just have to do. You know, during COVID, I saw some stupid things, just absolutely stupid things. I saw people buying homes for over the list price and waiving inspections. You know something? No house is that valuable at all. I have to mention that, but you know something? Always get inspections, whether it's new, whether it's existing. It's something that can really, really protect you. You want to make sure that a house is built right or that a house that's existing is in really, really good shape before you ever close on the property. So let's go into some detail and the type of inspections we can do. So let's talk about the typical inspection that's done in most places. Again, check with your state, check with where you're buying and with your specialist, and find out exactly what inspections cover. But at the very basic, it's electrical, mechanical, and plumbing. Now, what does that mean? That means that all the plumbing fixtures, all the electrical fixtures, all the appliances, all the plumbing, everything is inspected. Mechanical is also central heat and air. Now, the other thing that I have inspectors do that they do license-wise in our state is they do foundation. They look at the topography to make sure that, water is pooling away from the house, not at the foundation level. They look at the roof, which is a mechanical item. So they look at a lot of detail in terms of what we call a basic inspection. Now, they're not there to say, well, there's some scuff marks here, or, there's a little bit of problem on the crown molding or whatever. Those are cosmetic things. Now, those can be handled separately with your property manager, but pretty much as a rule, they're not a part of inspections. What you want to know is fundamentals. You want to know that all these things that are going to cost you money if you close without them are taken care of previous to closing. Now, an inspector, and I know this is the way it works for us, is if they're not a structural engineer, for instance, they can't really say that the foundation's good or bad. They can notate problems and say, based on my observation, this looks a little suspicious. I recommend that you get an inspection by a structural engineer. Now, structural engineer is somebody that has studied engineering, obviously in college and gotten a degree. Pretty much it's mostly commercial. It's on-the-job training most of the time. But I know in our state that they're state licensed. They have resumes, and we've got some really outstanding ones. There's about 3 that I always use because they're really honest, straightforward, good. If something's wrong, they're going to say it's wrong. So you might want to have that done. Now, in some parts of the country, not where I am, but in the northern part, there's radon, for instance, radon gas. A lot of this is with basements in the north. You may want to have a radon gas inspection. Maybe that's covered in your state, maybe it's not, but it's something to consider. If a house is built previously to 1978, it can have lead-based paint. Now, normally this is lead-based paint that is in paint, as versus something else, like in the ground. If you have any indication that you're in an area where there's a lot of lead, for whatever reason, that's in the ground, it's a whole nother story. But normally if you paint over lead-based paint, it's not a problem. Now if you're in a very blighted area where paint is flaking and you have what we call slum housing, and it's not being taken care of, understand that lead-based paint was sweet to taste, and a lot of kids start biting into it. So it can be a problem, but the kind of properties we deal with is not the case. It's pretty rare to buy a property, for us anyway, previous to 1978. Doesn't mean it's a bad investment, and it could be a really cool house and close to your downtown that rents for a ton. But the one thing, if it's built previous to 1978, you may want to also put in there a lead-based paint inspection. Now, normally throughout the country in most type of loans, there's an addendum that you sign off on that says, I'm okay with it or I'm not okay with it. So that is something that's a part of the contract. If it's previous to 1978, consult with your specialist and say, do you really think I should spend the money on this? Now, there's another issue, which is mold, and we talk about this a lot. And it used to be a big deal because lawyers used to say mold is gold because it hey, this is a new thing. It's something we can sue on. The problem you have with mold is mold can be natural. You may have a shower curtain, and because of humidity in a hot shower, you may see something that really is mold. It's not what's called Stachybotrys, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is toxic mold. So if you go into a house and there's a lot of black on there, might mean you think, should I buy this in the first place? But you may want to get a mold inspection. Now understand, federal government doesn't have good guidelines. There are guidelines on radon. There are guidelines on lead-based paint to go by. It's very strict. In the case of mold, it's a little iffy, but that's one other thing that you can possibly do in terms of inspection. So decide whether you want to do these things on the type of a house that you're buying. So there's some that are going to be in your contract, and it's going to be varying from state to state. There's other things you may want to consider if you want to do further inspections. Now, in the case of a structural, normally that is not done until an inspector who says, there's a problem here, we think, get a structural engineer, but some of these things should be put into the contract depending on where you are. So let's talk about in the inspection what working condition is versus age. So understand that things either work or they don't work. I was in a home at one time that I owned that had a heat and air and a refrigerator. It was the first built-in refrigerator I've ever heard of, that were working for 36 years. So they worked. And because they worked, they did not need to be replaced. But so when they go in there, they're going to say it either works or it doesn't work. Now in heat and air, if it's in the summer, what they're going to do is they're going to do a check on the air conditioning to make sure that it really does cool, because there can be a problem with Puron, or some other type of system that they use that makes it doesn't work right. Now, in the case of air conditioning, if it's a situation where it's 30 degrees, they can't check it. Understand that times of the year can really affect this. So understand that working condition is that. Now code, typically these are not code inspections, because code changes all the time. If it's something that's a danger, okay, they can cite code. I'll give you an example. If you had a non-licensed plumber put in our area where you have a lot of natural gas that's used, and if it's not 18 inches off the garage floor, it was put in illegally. And that is something that can be combustible. And so therefore, that is something where code can be cited, but check again with your specialist and your inspector in terms of doing that. If it's a hazard, then code can be put into place, but code changes. So if something is at the end of its normal lifespan, like I say, 18 years on a central heat and air system, one of my systems lasted 36 years. It didn't need to be replaced later, but that's the way the system works. If it's illegal, that's a problem, and it can be cited. And negotiations come into place at that point. So inspection should always be a contingency. It should be something that allows you to get out of the contract. The seller says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do anything, then fine. You're out of it. That contingency is cited. Your earnest money returns, and you go on to the next house because you don't have a good seller. Understand that buyer and seller have to agree. They have to sign off on this. And again, remember, and I can't repeat this enough, licensed people do licensed work and get invoices, okay? But understand this also, it's a negotiable item. If something is minor and you got a great deal, don't be hardcore. Don't sweat the small stuff. Understand that you want to make sure that a few $1,000s is taken care of. $50, $150, and they say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Make the decision whether the house is worth it or not. And if you got a $10,000, $20,000 equity, do not sweat something for $150 that's not done. Then here's my rule of thumb. I've done this for almost 35 years. I have never, ever done an as-is contract, period. Now, they may say we're not doing any repairs. That may be something they say up front in a house. But guess what? I still put into the contract is subject and contingent upon the buyer's acceptance of the inspection report, because I distrust as is. It's a red flag to me. There's another red flag we didn't talk about. It may be okay, maybe they just don't have the money to do it, but you still want to be able to get out of the contract. Never put that you're accepting a property and as is condition. If you want to, go ahead. I think it's nuts. I think it's crazy. I think it's bad business. So do not do that. Make it subject to the inspection, even if they're saying they're not going to do repairs. Again, making sure that this is certified by licensed contractors. I keep saying this mainly because I've seen it happen where things are screwed up and a lot of money is being put out of pocket by people. I won't allow that. If you want to ask for their license, that's okay. All right, I want proof, before we even get in here. And again, they'll give a warranty. That's the most important thing. So you have somebody with that invoice to call and say, hey, it's been 10 days and your repair didn't hold. All right, I don't have cooling. I don't have heating, whatever it happens to be. My faucet is leaking. Come on back and take care of it. So these are the things that happen when you go into those inspections and you finalize the inspections. Make sure this is taken care of. So I hope that didn't drive you crazy, but something, it's such a crucial part of the contract and the process, and never should be overlooked. It is something that's so important to you. I don't want you to get into a bad investment in any particular way. Having inspections done, regardless of whether they do repairs or not, is the way to protect yourself. Now, I want to do a little bit more in the next class about title insurance and what it does and what it doesn't do. We went into safe and clear title before. We'll revisit that, but we'll talk a lot more about title insurance in the next module. Stay tuned.